Hello everyone, welcome to the 140 Literary and Jury Charge. We're going to finish up our article on plight of the grizzly. Okay, all right, here we go. Ready? Now, we are probably spending more than $2 million a year to keep the token grizzlies we want in the West, more than we are paying for any other endangered or threatened species. Alternatives being considered for further protection, closing certain park and national forest lands to humans, habitat improvement, and supplemental feeding, which still cost more. Inevitably, questions about price raise larger ones about values, but in all the voluminous testimony about how to save grizzlies, next to nothing has been said about why we should have them at all. Chris Servin, a Fish and Wildlife Service biologist and the chief scientific consultant to a committee of federal and state executives now grappling with grizzly preservation, likes to hike into an isolated district in the Mission Range of Montana. In those parts, he is always aware that he might meet a grizzly. I'll hear an odd sound and prickles will start on the back of my neck. It is fear, but the consequences are interesting. My senses seem extraordinarily sharp. It is more than being alert to danger. It is a kind of super awareness about myself and everything around me. Those are the times when I feel most alive. If there were no bears, I would not have that experience, which I think is very valuable. I am much less acquainted with grizzlies than is Servin. However, once to the northeast of Great Bear Lake in Canada, I slid down a pingo and luckily caught myself before I fell on top of a female grizzly and her cub 15 feet below. Without even looking up, the female grunted a few times and padded off with her cub into the scrub. I was absolutely motionless, not as a reasoned tactic, but because for the only time in my life I fully understood the meaning of petrified by fear. I experienced the sensation Servin was talking about, one of the marvelously heightened consciousness. Those few seconds remain the most memorable, the most powerful experience of a generally stimulative summer in the Arctic wilderness. That a grizzly can provide such a direct emotional charge does not in itself justify a complicated public effort to keep a few of the animals in our western states. Nevertheless, I think they are generally worthwhile, despite the trouble and expense of keeping them. In trying to save such an animal, we express our humanity, that we can act on abstract principles for intellectual, aesthetic, and compassionate reasons. We also admit that because of these attributes, we have unique responsibilities not to destroy marvels we cannot recreate. All preservation efforts confer the same benefits, but the grizzly seems special because he is such a hard case. Keeping this beast will give our ethical reflexes a real workout. Wilderness areas are gaudy demonstration plots of the ancient, immensely complex system that has produced and supports life in this world. We probably will never know exactly how it works, but it is very important that we understand that we operate within the system. Most of us need an exhibition like the wilderness to drive home the message. And the grizzly, he has such a prowess, history, and reputation that he is not only of the wilderness, but makes wilderness on the ground and in our heads. we can sit securely at a scenic highway, overlook, and if we know that there are great bears in the expanse of mountains and forests below us, we understand immediately that we are in the presence of wilderness. Valuable reflections often follow. This world remains a dangerous place. Trees or muggers can fall on us. We can succumb to microbes or motor vehicles, or incinerate ourselves for political reasons. But the great bear is the only thing around that now and then, simply as an expression of its nature, can step out and make us his meat. We can take the bear out of the woods permanently, but this will not change the reality he so powerfully represents. It will only make that reality more difficult to understand and remember. Okay. I have some congressional record for you. And let's see here. This is called In Mourning. Okay, here we go. Ready? Mr. Speaker, last Tuesday, at the age of 89, one of our former colleagues, who was a strong man and determined man, passed away. Calvin Theodore, known as Ted Hawthorne, of Seattle, Washington, will be long remembered in these chambers. Ted served as a member of the House of Representatives for more than a quarter of a century. He presided as chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. He introduced progressive civil rights legislation. He supported the Equal Rights Amendment, and he worked closely with the governor of the state of Washington to protect the coastal environment. When I first came to the House, Ted was one of the first persons that I met. He encouraged me to speak out on issues that made my blood boil. He enlisted my advice and aid on several of his pet projects. He wasn't content to sit and watch. He was aggressive, yet a good listener. Ted Hawthorne never lost his zest for living. After his retirement from the House in 2007, his political life did not stop. Ted ran for the office of City Council member in Seattle. Although he was defeated on election night, he offered his full services to the victor. Since Ted's passing, I have realized how important it is to recognize the special needs of all groups. Sometimes we are so caught up in our own problems and strategies that we overlook the needs of others whose attention is merited. Indeed, we will miss Calvin Theodore Hawthorne, but we will remember his contributions to the state of Washington and to the American people. On behalf of the members of the state of Washington delegation, I would like to extend our sincere sympathy to the family of Calvin Theodore Hawthorne. Okay, moving right into legal opinion and argument. Ready? Now, with respect to the other requested discovery, both from the standpoint of documentation and the 60 questions which are the subject of this motion, The sole justification, as I see it, for all of this requested discovery is that the allegation Coast conduct was motivated by particular anti-competitive desires, and that this somehow is relevant to the determination of this dispute, the validity of this sublease to Leo's Stereo. What Huntington Center is trying to do here, Your Honor, is to place in issue the question of what Coast motivation precisely was when it asked Huntington Center for permission to consummate this sublease transaction. Specifically, they want to know what Coast motivation was in moving out of Huntington Center to relocate its branch office elsewhere in the center, and secondly, what its motivation was in wanting to sublease this property to Leo Stereo, which admittedly is a non-savings and loan association subtenant. Coast submits that this issue of motivation is really not an issue and cannot be an issue in this case. It is a false issue. It is a non-issue in all the following respects. First, Your Honor, with respect to the concept of a business moving from location A to location B in order to improve its business, that to me inherently, by definition, is not anti-competitive. It is competitive. The business is trying to improve itself, trying to compete better with its direct competitors in the area. There is nothing wrong and illegal about that. I can't see anything wrongful and illegal about a business, any business, not just the savings and loan business, wanting to move to a better location. What conceivably is anti-competitive about that? Secondly, let's assume for the purpose of argument that a business in location, say 91 Huntington Center, with the right under the lease provisions to sublet with the landlord's agreement, not to unreasonably withhold consent, is motivated after it moves out to a better location, not to sublet to one of its direct competitors. I submit again, Your Honor, there is nothing wrongful, there is nothing illegal about that motivation, whether that is an only motivation or whether that is just a part of their motivation. I mean, if you look at it in another context, Your Honor, I submit it is absurd. Let's assume that McDonald's was at Huntington Center as a lessor. They wanted to move across the street to Edinger Plaza because there is a freestanding facility, the traffic is better, they had better visibility, so they move across and they want to sublet Huntington Center. Is it wrong for them not to want to sublet to Jack in the Box? We would like to sublet to another responsible, reliable, financially credible subtenant, which would be reasonably acceptable to the landlord. We didn't want to put a direct competitor across the street from us. Secondly, Your Honor, motive is irrelevant in the context of this kind of contract dispute. After all, this is a contract dispute. It has nothing to do with the it has to do with the interpretation of a lease contract. I submit to Your Honor, if Coast is in violation of their master lease with Huntington Center, in either moving out of Huntington Center or in subletting to Leo Stereo, the fact that Coast was motivated by the most pure and pristine kind of belief what it was doing was right. the court is going to say, it's tough. You may have thought you were in violation of an agreement. You may have thought you were not in violation of the lease. You forfeited the lease. We evict the subtenant from the premises. Okay, so I'll go ahead and stop there. I'm going to read a segment from Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. And this is on Ask Yourself the Question, will this matter in a year from now? Okay, all right. Here we go. Almost every day, I play a game with myself that I call time warp. I made it up in response to my consistent, erroneous belief that what I was all worked up about was really important. To play time warp, all you have to do is imagine that whatever circumstance you are dealing with isn't happening right now, but a year from now. Then simply ask yourself, is this situation really as important as I'm making it out to be? Once in a great while, it may be, but a vast majority of the time, it simply isn't. Whether it be an argument with your spouse, child, or boss, a mistake, a lost opportunity, a lost wallet, a work-related rejection, a sprained ankle, locked the keys in the car, chances are, a year from now, you aren't going to care. It will be one more irrelevant detail in your life. While this simple game won't solve all your problems, it can give you an enormous amount of needed perspective. I find myself laughing at things that I used to take far too seriously. Now, rather than using up my energy, feeling angry and overwhelmed, I can use it instead on spending time with my wife and children or engaging in creative thinking. Great advice there. Okay. Got some expert testimony. Here we go. Ready? All right. I entered the field of real estate in 1985 as a real estate salesman for a company which was later to become the Centuron Realty Company, and I was engaged in the selling, leasing, and the rental of real property, and in some property management business until 1995, at which time I took the examination and became a real estate broker and a business opportunity broker. I continued in the real estate field full-time until 1998, when I undertook the appraisal of real property, and I attended the University of Southern California. I took special courses sponsored by the American Institute of Real Estate Appraisers called Real Estate Case Studies, course number 101, which was put on at USC in 1998. In 1999, I went to the University of Colorado and took case studies courses number 102. Unfortunately, I failed the examination in Colorado. There were 2 out of a class of 55 that passed the examination, So the examination was offered again, and I did not take the re-examination, but I attended the course at USC in 2000 and retook Case Studies course number 102 and successfully passed the examination. And at that time, I assisted in the field work and training aspect of the course. From 1998 until the present time, the majority of my time has been devoted to real estate and to the appraisal of real property. I have become the president of Centurion Realty Company and do conduct a general real estate business under that name at the same address, 1250 Glen Canyon Avenue in Los Angeles. And in 2005, I formed a corporation for the appraisal business, appraisal and right-of-way acquisition business called the Southern California Appraisers Incorporated, and I'm president of that corporation also. It is located at the same address in Los Angeles. I have been employed full-time in the appraisal and brokerage of real estate since 1985, with the exception of during the war. I spent 3 years at a Midwestern defense plant, but I maintained my interest and kept up my activities in the real estate field at the same time. Okay, so that concludes our literary and jury charge for the 140 class. Have a great day.